Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and you want to find out more about investment opportunities, go to firstgencp.com/invest.
You have to invest into the lifestyles that you want to have, invest in your family security, and that is not the job. The job itself is not secure. It's the fact that you have a plan for your financial, and that can help you in the time that is hard. You know where your runways are going to be.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And guess who I am? Yes, I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I am super excited to welcome you back to another conversation. This is going to be another amazing conversation, especially if you're an IT sales professional or an IT professional. You're really going to dig this one. But here's the thing. The podcast continues to move up the charts. I really appreciate each and every one of you for continuing to download the episodes, listen, share them, talk to them with your family and your friends, and I love seeing the progress that you continue to make. And if you've not had a chance yet, if you want to leave an honest written review as well as a rating on the Apple Podcast platform, we've got a nice little video that we'll show you in just a couple seconds, and you can do that. Let us know what you like, what you want to see changed, and what you want to see more of. So with that, also, I know a lot of you are looking to check out some of the very, very beginning episodes. Like at this point, we're over 210, which is amazing. If you want to find them, go to billykeels.com. When you get there, go to the podcast tab. You'll click there and you'll find every single episode that we've ever done. So check that out. And also too, lastly, those of you who are accredited investors, you want to connect with other accredited investors, send me an email, aiclub@billykeels.com. Got some really cool stuff going on over there. Got a lot of people that are talking about really cool things, especially if you enjoy keeping your own money. This was probably a good place for you to connect with us. Accredited investors, we've talked about it. You know who you are. Send me an email, aiclub@billykeels.com. And as for today's conversation, this one is a great one. You're really going to like it. So today's guest was and is living out in Washington, the state of Washington, in the IT industry, shared some very vulnerable things with us in the conversation that led to her decision to go ahead and move and start to become her own CEO and help other people, and doing that through investing, not just in real estate, but a number of other assets, other vehicles that help everyone to get, or help people to get to your destination. So you're really going to enjoy today's conversation with Elisa Zhang, and we're going to get to that in just after this. Are you a busy, high-paid professional, someone who's made $200,000 the previous 2 years and also expected to earn $200,000 this year? Or maybe as a couple, you filed jointly and you've earned $300,000 the previous 2 years and also expected to earn $300,000 together this year. Or maybe yourself, or as a couple, you have $1 million in net worth, not including your home. Well, if you meet any of those criteria, then the IRS considers you to be someone who is an accredited investor. And so that probably means you're a top producing software sales executive, or maybe you're a highly paid consultant. Maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a doctor or a business owner. You may even work for a professional sports franchise. Well, one way or the other, you've done a lot of really hard work to get to where you are. You've done 100% of the work, and nowadays you're continuing to get crushed by taxes. And that means you're only bringing home 50% of the reward. If you're tired of doing this over and over and you're looking for a solution to start to keep more of your money, you can go to firstgencp.com/invest so that you can start to keep more of your money, which means that you can start to have the freedom to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, with whom you want to do it. So once again, go to firstgencp.com/invest to see how we can start to help you today. Once again, that's firstgencp.com/invest. So you know what? If you want to know how to use your background in IT to create your runway to long-distance investing success, then guess what? Today's the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest not only started a professional career at a company called Microsoft. I think many people probably have heard of that, maybe one or two, in various roles over 11 years. And I'm sure our guest is going to tell us more about that experience. Then afterwards, moved on to product management for another company called Groupon, in a sector that is really, really close to my heart. So I really want to talk about this as well. Travel experience, that kind of stuff is awesome. And also, while at Microsoft, developed a love for not only fine arts, but also real estate. That's really exciting. And since then has continued to invest in real estate in multiple states like Washington and Texas and Arizona, and there's probably a whole lot others by now. And she is the founder of EZFI, where she continues to focus on educating and advising others to generate passive income. And she is also the host of the super popular podcast, 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Elisa Zhang. Elisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Billy.
Look at that. Elisa, I get all like tongue-tied and excited. I'm like, here you go. So yes, Elisa Zhang, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really looking forward to the conversation. I appreciated what we were talking about in the beginning of the show. We have lots in common. And so a lot of our high-paid professionals that are in the IT industry are really going to relate a lot to your story today. So as you know, Elisa, I like to ask everybody 5 questions. You're going to get 2 in the beginning. You're going to get 3 in the end. And in the middle, you're going to get a lot of questions. I just don't happen to know what those questions are yet. So if you can help us out with the very first question, help us understand, where is it that you live in the U.S.?
I live in Seattle, Washington, which is great in the summer, but for 8 months of the year, it's not that great. It's very rainy. Kind of like living in London. Yeah.
Well, I actually spent a fantastic August there one year, many years ago, and it was absolutely spectacular. So, but yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of rain there, but when it's nice and sunny, it's fantastic. Yeah. Also, the other thing, Lisa, help us understand, what is the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Well, I would say spending time with my kids for the last 24 hours. I just got done about 10 days of business trip. It's a lot of travel. So definitely spending some time with family, kids, reconnect. That's really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And being able to have that quality time is fantastic, especially when you're away and you're traveling for business and things like that. And I appreciate you sharing the importance of that family time, because it really, really is important. So here's the thing, Elisa, and I know just kind of getting the conversation started, there's a couple of things. Number one, I know we're getting to know one another here a little bit, but I tend to kind of hold the bar up very, very high. And sometimes I give myself these really impossible tasks, like telling your entire backstory in 3.5 seconds. Very, very difficult, because you've impacted way too many lives. You're doing way too many amazing things. So hopefully you'll forgive me for trying to do that. But hey, it's what I do. But here's the other thing. I hope you can help me by having you tell your backstory in your own words. And then if you could also help me and the Going Long family by talking to us about some of the major decisions that you've also made to get to this point in your journey. And then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Yeah, sounds good. I don't know if I can do it in the 3 seconds or so. That's literally...
That's what I tried to do, and it's impossible. I tried to do that. I failed miserably. It's okay. So now you can take the time that you need to tell your own story. Go right ahead.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess I will talk about this elevator pitch. If someone asks you what you do, I think it's very important everybody knows what that elevator pitch is. So for me, currently what I do is I'm an apartment syndicator, which is really a fancy way to say that we're pouring people's money together and purchase apartments. That's really simply what I do. And before that, as you alluded in the intro, I worked for Fortune 500 IT companies, and worked in that industry for probably a little over 13 years, I want to say, before I reached my what's so-called financial independence. We all know, for people who are very highly motivated after we reach financial independence, it just means that you're working now 80 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week for your own endeavor, because you're bored. So that's kind of what I do. So really a little bit background for me is I was an immigrant. I grew up in China and moved to Canada when I was 17. And for me, when I growing up, my dad is always this role model, because here we are in China, Shanghai, where I grew up. Everybody in middle class, we shared one studio with the family of 4, whereas my dad have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And that's kind of just in terms of quality of living, this is kind of what you look for. So my dad is an engineer. So naturally, I become an engineer as well, computer engineer for that. Because I figured, looking at him working all his life, being a mechanical engineer, not making a lot of money. So computer engineer at the time was a computer, anything to do with computers hot. So computer engineer is naturally what I graduated from. So I ended up in Seattle, loved the city. Prior to that, I traveled many cities, etc., including Spain. Love Spain. So Seattle is where I kind of decided where I'm going to settle. Out of college, start working for Microsoft as a product manager or program manager per se. It's a very technical role. Essentially, you act like little mini CEOs for your projects. And this actually has, in many different ways, shapes the skill sets I would talk about, like what I do right now as really the real CEO or the CDO of the company, what we do over here. So it was a very interesting job other than software developers. I get to touch every parts of the product developments. So it was really exciting for the first couple of years until, you start getting into the senior end of things. Your boss keeps on having conversations with you on performance, how to get to the next ladder. It just feels like something isn't fulfilled. Climbing this ladder specifically is not very satisfying. And I think in large corporation, when we're thinking about it, is large corporations are trying to train soldiers, right? So the larger they are, the specialized your role is going to be. The smaller they are, the more general you have to be. So every one of us have different personalities and what we're born to do. I know it sounds cliche, but truly, if you took these personality tests, one I would recommend is Kobe Index A test, which we have our employees take now over here. It kind of displayed what your unique ability are. So, like for me, it was later on I realized it wasn't. That was one reasons why you feel like that your job is soul sucking. But it was okay. We put it up with it. At the same time, 2009 hit, 2008 hit. If for folks who invest in real estate, you probably remember a down cycle. And then we just start investing in real estate since 2009. So we bought in a good market. But single family homes when we first started, because we weren't, really focused on doing it, and we didn't have an education or anything. We just like, oh, let's buy something and then hold it, right? Not the right way to invest, but right time to invest. So it's very forgiving if you invest in the right time. So from there in 2015, my first child was born. When you have kids, it changes your perspective a lot in terms of it puts life in the center versus your job. Before, a lot of us are living for our job because where you live, where you hang out, you purchase your houses all near around your job, right? Like proximity to job is a great indicator for real estate values and etc. So, that kind of really shifted my thoughts in terms of life versus work, and work should really serve the purpose of life versus the other way around. When I was commuting, 3 hours, sometimes up to 3 hours to work, because I choose to not live near work. Like what I realized is that I didn't even spend more than 2.5 hours with my kid. So something isn't right over here. So that becomes a catalyst for me to really be serious about real estate investing. Why real estate? Because, at the same time, I've by that time saved my 401k almost nearly for 9 years, right? Diligently put the money in there, let alone like ESPPs and etc. But every time I look at that balance, I'm just like, what? Like, it didn't grow really, even though the media would tell you, hey, your investment really growing at like 8%, but it didn't grow because your 401k is really limited in things that you can invest in. And we kind of talked about that on our YouTube channel about that too. So like really looking at that balance not increasing, like I'm supposed to retire on this. And but real estate at the same time, by that time, we already had a couple single family homes invested. Even though it was done wrongly, we put them on 15-year mortgage, cash flow number isn't as high as it would be, but it's kicking out steady cash flow every single month. So it's like, well, this makes money. The stock wasn't making money, right? So you're like, okay. So I searched, actually, I literally Googled this, how to retire investing in real estate. And Bigger Pockets came up. So Bigger Pockets is this really popular, it's like the Facebook for real estate investing in the US. And I read all the free blogs. Now, warning, not all free advice is good advices. Nowadays, when I look it back, right? But at the time, it was appropriate education. And I actually met my current partners over there as well on the internet. But he's in Seattle, so we actually met each other as well in physically meeting each other as well. So from there, I learned so much more, and I was like, oh, all these years we're doing real estate wrong. We should be investing in multifamilies, due to the scalability and the economy of skills. So we decided to change our strategy using leveraging, put our mortgage on 30-year mortgages. And the good thing is at that time, we had a few single family holdings, so we can use them almost like chess games. You swap this with a bigger card or whatever. I don't play chess, as you can know. So basically, from there, we were able to do 1031 exchanges or cross leveraging, taking some money out of our single family. Because one thing we did do was buy at the right time. So we had a lot of equity. So you can pull out these equity and reinvest it into fourplexes at the time that we bought. And then from there, I self-managed them. And they're all B and C class fourplexes, I would say. So to explain this to your viewer, listener, B and C classes are older products, and usually they have deferred maintenances, and then you want to, what we call value add, you want to fix them and then increase the rent. Really what that is, what that is. And then when you increase the rent, then you increase your monthly cash flow. So that's why multifamily can be a really good cash flow vehicle, because if you have 4 unit versus 1, you increase the money $100 per month for your tenants. That's $400 increase versus single family home. You increase that rent $400, you may have to look for a different renter, right? So that kind of things, it really kind of help. So from there, we just kind of accumulated more and more multifamilies, and then I was like, okay, it's not challenging enough. I actually self-managed my tenant. My husband actually renovate them down to the drywalls and all the other stuff. So we kind of know that process pretty well. You do not need to do that if you invest in multifamily, just FYI. That's just the method that we did it. And then we started to look for, commercial multifamily. So anything other than 4 units, more than 4 units, starting from 5 units is considered commercial multifamily. The difference is really where the fourplex are smaller, you can have residential loan. The commercial multifamily, you have to go with a different types of loan. And it's managed differently too. So I bought a 12 unit in Tacoma, took on a partner over there, removed ourselves from the day-to-day manage, and then hired a property management company, just to kind of learn all these different ropes for this. So that's the first venture into commercial multifamily. And then I was looking for more because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. When I counted this, okay, cash flow can replace what we make. We just need to have more doors. So from there, I was looking for more deals. That's 2017-ish, I want to say. So we're looking for more deals at that point. But for the whole entire year, I was not able to find any based on the purchase criteria I have right now. Now, hindsight, looking back, I'm like, well, there's so many deals I could have made, but I was being super conservative. Yeah. And also part of it not being experienced, knowing other value to be added to your property. So I went to all different meetups, 3 times a week, pretty much. Meanwhile, I still have a full-time job and meeting all different people. So your horizon kind of expanded there. And from there, we decided, okay, our next move is actually going outside of state. So we were told, once you go outside of state, you should have scalability, you should have more than 100 units to purchase. So we don't have enough capital to do so. So naturally, the next step is to syndicate. And then luckily, we build up enough of a portfolio locally, and then it helps pave the way for us to tell people like, hey, do you want to invest in it? And, investors are actually help to invest in our deal. So, we joined the mentorship group as well. At that point, it helps us accelerate the growth. We went to a lot of national conferences, and then just elevated our education as well. And from there, in 2018, we started our first syndication deal. We were only a part of the team. We're doing asset management. So fast forward now, due to this and that reason, we now are our own asset managers for our property. This just means that we operate the property. And we have about 3,000 doors that we manage, operates on, and probably another 1,000 that we are in the kind of co-sponsor capacity. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, I mean, there's a lot to be drawn from the story that you've shared, right? Everything from recognizing, and I love how you said that just from the very beginning, like you go from working 40 hours a week to working 80 hours a week for yourself.
Yes.
Well, for yourself and all of your clients, right? And so taking us through that to the point where now not only are you managing your own assets, you are also co-sponsoring assets with others. A lot of the things that you mentioned really resonate with me. I mean, I've been investing, or prior to leaving, or prior to no longer being part of the corporate world, I worked 9 years being able to, excel. I was working for a company called SAP at the time, very large as well, the type of organization, and, in the IT space, and building my own life, but living in Barcelona and investing exclusively back in the United States. So there's a lot of things that you shared with us that I know that a lot of the busy, high-paid professionals that are listening to us today can really resonate with. But there's something that you mentioned earlier that I really wanted to come back to, because you mentioned that you were having conversations in your day job, and they were the conversations that were about, hey, listen, you've been doing these things, and now it's time for you to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that these conversations were not fulfilling you because you felt at that point in time that what you were doing wasn't fulfilling you. Can you maybe talk to that person, or maybe talk to that experience that you were having? Because a lot of people, Elisa, and I know you're familiar with this, when you get the promotion, like that's the thing that you're really excited about. Everybody works the promotion. You want the bigger car. You want more people on your team. You want all those things. And you were having that experience, but your thought was, I'm not really feeling satisfied at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I didn't look too far, right? So I kind of looked at my boss, because it's natural to say, okay, your next progression is like your boss job, right? Unless if you like change to a different field. And that would be a lateral move, which means that you don't get promotion. Right. And so I looked at my boss's job, and just like at the time he was stressed out. He has to managing up and managing down. So it's that middle management job. And then his boss, which is also a middle management job, it's not until like 5-6 layers up then you become the C-suite. And then that, to me, I think in my head, it was just like, okay, to get to a C-suite for like Microsoft, it's kind of like almost an unimaginable feat. Yeah. It's almost easier if I created my own business and then just made myself the own boss. At the time, I wasn't thinking about opening my own business. It's just simply about investing. And then the fact that I can commit my time, I can work wherever I want to and whenever I want to. That flexibility of freedom of choice is what I'm really going for. And then who I can say, I don't know if the show's PG or not, but I can say, go away, go away. And then I don't need your business, right? So like at that point, I think that freedom is really, I obviously couldn't articulate to you that was what I was going for at the time, but it feels at the time it feels unfulfilled, especially in a large corporation that you feel unfulfilled. The reason why I'm kind of mentioning about the larger corporation, because you can't, as you saw my journey, you can't just dial 0 to 100 and just decided that, hey, I'm going to quit. A lot of guests that we have interviewed on our podcast, some of them did just say, I can't focus on 2 things, so I just quit cold turkey. But the common consensus is it's a very stressful experience. Oftentimes you try to save enough and then give yourself the wrong way to do that. That's one way to do it. And the other is just kind of grinding. Because yes, you have your 40-hour job, and then when you come back home, you're working another 20 to 40 doing this side investment. And so it's totally not as some of the show will maybe paint it to be a rosy road. But I think the motivation is really important to keep you going. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I completely agree with you. I mean, there is no one path for everybody, right? As long as you know where your North Star is, you know what you are willing to sacrifice, because there is some type of sacrifice that you must make if you want to achieve things. Because if there were no sacrifice, then everybody would be doing it, right? And there's also a lot of truth in that. When you're working in a large company, of course, there are lots of benefits. I mean, it's great. I mean, you worked in a market leading company, so did I. So when you're in an industry like the IT, especially in software, I mean, these are industries that are like cutting edge. So these are the places that people really, really want to be. And there's a lot of truth at the same time where you recognize that, hey, listen, my future is the future that my boss has, or my boss's boss had. And if you can look that way and decide, hey, listen, this is something that you really want to do, well, then guess what? That's probably a path that's going to be the right thing for you. If you really can't sleep well at night because you can't even imagine living the lifestyle that they're living, well, you know what? Maybe it's not the right thing for you. And maybe you continue to do your normal job for 5-10 years like I did, or you decide, hey, listen, I'm going to just stop, and you have then live the life that comes with making those kind of abrupt decisions. And so agree with you that there is no one size fits all. It depends on the context of the individual, but there are lots of different things that can be learned. So I appreciate you sharing that, because it's really important insight, because I know many people go through that and they're like, well, what should I do? And you've given
and sometimes it's switching a job as well, which is why the switch between, Microsoft and Groupon. I mean, people ask me why you switch that. Well, simply because the commute. I've decided at one point it's just not worthwhile to design my life around my work. It only took like 2 miscarriages to get there, and then when you go through these emotional cycles and you realize you're like, well, what am I doing over here? Like, everything is a job priority, but you live a life much larger than your job. So simple move from Microsoft to Groupon, it cut down my commute time from 3 hours to like 20 minutes door to door back and forth. So, hey, like, even if it's a lateral, not to mention I actually get a promotion there, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's accumulated. It's not one single thing leads to it, but your path is somewhat designed for you in some ways, that at moments like these, you start having epiphanies, and that helps you pivot around your life.
No, I appreciate your sharing that. I appreciate your vulnerability. And what more and more that you hear these types of stories, it is so many times we can believe that it's just the money that creates the decision making, but there are real life factors when you start to realize what is the quality of life that you're looking for, and what are the personal life events that have led you to understand what truly are the priorities in your life. So thank you for sharing that with us. Really hope you're enjoying today's conversation. And once again, if you're an accredited investor and you are tired of getting crushed by your W-2 taxes, and you're looking for a new way to gain more control over your freedom to choose, go to firstgencp.com/invest. Once again, that's firstgencp.com/invest. Now let's get back to today's conversation. One other thing that I did want to ask you about as well, you talked about, like, after 2017, you were clear, you were conservative on your purchase criteria. I tend to relate with that as well. I'm sure a lot of opportunities when I first got started, because I was like, if it doesn't pencil out exactly like I learned it in the book. So that happened. But then, one of the things that is also interesting. So you said that you wanted to go out of state. So the thing that happened, and this is like the whole genesis for this podcast, because when I got started and all the books that I read, the books talked to me about, and whether it said it directly or indirectly, like become a landlord, buy where you live, and that way you can have more control and da-da-da-da-da. Well, I fundamentally don't believe that is the only way to do it, which is why the Going Long podcast exists, because for 10 years, I lived in Europe and invested exclusively back in the United States. At the same time, I realized maybe today a little bit less, but 10 years ago, like, that was super contrarian. But you literally were thinking, like, I want to go long. I want to go out of state. So what was it that was really the motivator for you to want to do something that's so contrarian as invest beyond your backyard?
Yeah. So I think it's really about inventory. If you live in the market, let's say if you live in Dallas, you live in Phoenix, like don't look anywhere else.
Yeah.
You got a great market in your backyard, right? But for me, it was because the difficulties of finding deals at that single moment, at that moment. If you gone to 3 meetups every week, talk to all various different person, try to look for deals, and for a whole entire year and then got no results, then yes, there's a part of you that being super conservative, you want to kill every single deal. So that needs to be fixed. But you got to be doing something different, right? Like if you have tried, like someone said this, I don't remember whose quote it was, but the true madness is doing something same repeatedly and then expecting a different results. Yeah. So that's kind of like where I was like, okay, a year is long enough for you to go to local up and down, like in North and South Seattle, Tacoma area, to look for a deal, building the network and not getting into that. So either the method or the people that you meet are not the right way, or maybe this is just not the market for us. So that being said, that was the reason why we start, investing out of state. Part of another reason is because I mentioned we started by being in the business, working in the business, not on the business. Very quickly, you realize you can't scale. If you have 100 unit, if they're all fourplexes, then you have 25 buildings. At 3-4 buildings, you're like, okay, I'm tapped out doing part-time job, but I still need to get from here to like, let's say 50 units or so in order to build the cash flow for me to retire. That simply that path to that is not sustainable. So that's kind of another reason why we decided to investing out of state, which is really force ourselves to remove ourselves from working in the business. That's also another reason why the first commercial multifamily we bought is in Tacoma, which is about 3 hours commute, really going back and forth. So making my husband going out there fixing something that's minor, not feasible. Right. So you have to start learning how to hire contractors and managing your property management remotely. So that really, it's just part of the growth. Yeah. And then now hindsight looking at it, I think it was definitely the right move because the whole West Coast has become so tenant friendly. So that's a single factor that cannot be controlled by yourself. Not that, other market can turn into that, but the market we specifically invested in are typically more landlord friendly. So that helps you being a business owner, having more control over your destiny. So for all these reasons, that was why it was a more deliberate move to invest out of state.
Yeah. And so when you start to think about things like inventory or just availability of the type of units that you're looking for, the type of assets that you're looking for, that can definitely be one of the factors. Also scalability, meaning that you want to be able to purchase something that's larger. Well, if you go to some other type of location or then that could be something that would make more sense potentially economically. And at the same time, you have to figure out how are you going to manage that? Because, and when I say you, and hopefully you all agree with this, when we say you, we're not literally talking about you, we're talking about your team. And that's one of the things that you talked about. And so I know a lot of times, and we've come from very similar environments, right? At least from a software perspective, you're so busy in your role that sometimes you forget to stop to make sure that you're focused on the things that are important to you. Now, you've just shared something with us that's very important, but what would you say to yourself at the time, recognizing that you're super busy, to say, hey, listen, work is really important. However, what are some of the other things that you would share with other people that are listening, that are in that same kind of busyness that you and I used to live in, to help them, because they're here listening? You've got a story that can resonate with them. And what's that thing that you would say to them to help them gain a little bit more clarity on priorities?
I think if you enjoy working, work is important. I mean, work is only important because the lifestyle that you have to sustain. If you kind of think about that, right? I mean, the whole work environment the trainings, the societal training really geared you up, prepare you to work for your job. But being a business owner, you see it very clearly. Your employees are working for you. And so therefore, when you're working a full-time job, working for others, you're working on their business, really. And then not saying that everybody should be a business owner. There's always workers and then this and that. If you enjoy what you do, continue doing what you do. Don't get pressured into creating your own business. But your financial is only you're responsible for it. Only you're in control of it. When your job terminates at some point, whether by you or whether by your employee, then that's not the whole meaning of your life. So then you need to have a plan B to prepare for when these events are happening. And there are vehicles for you to passively manage, like passively investing your money, the hard-earned money that you have from work, instead of just put it into, consumption. Like you mentioned, buying bigger cars. Like our car is still from 2007 Matrix, as a dent on the side because I never bothered fixed it. Because to me, car wasn't anything that is super enjoyable. So that's not where I choose to spend my money at. But you have to invest into the lifestyles that you want to have. Invest it in your family security, and that is not the job. The job itself is not secure. It's the fact that you have a plan for your financial. And that can help you in the time that is hard. Where your wrong ways are going to be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I appreciate you providing that perspective because it is one of those things where sometimes you just need to hear someone who's been there and already been in that path and is sharing with perspective. Because once you have perspective, then it's a bit easier to put things into context. Yeah, go ahead.
And the thing is that you don't need to go from 0 to 100 because a lot of listeners, if they hear about this real estate investing thing, I don't know if there's great investment opportunity in Barcelona or not. I think one reason why you're continue to invest in US is, US market, in my opinion, is still one of the best real estate, area. So when you're investing, you should think about your investor. So what is most important to the investor is the return, right? If you want to be a landlord, you can be a landlord. But if you want to be an investor, then you have to look at returns, and all asset types should be viewed equally in a way that what return it yields you and what is the risk profile. So I think that's kind of one way to think about it. And people feel like, oh, I can't own the fourplex, or I'm in Barcelona or Europe and I can't buy properties over here because they just simply don't make sense cash flow wise. But there are many passive vehicles people have created, investing REITs, investing in private placement, investing in notes, like all these can be done remotely. And then you have to actively educate yourself on different types of investments and make your choice of investments because it could be multiple as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a big believer. And actually, before we get into the Go Along Final Three, I'm just going to ask you maybe to expand a little bit more on that. But I'm a big believer in there is no one perfect asset. And anyone says there is one vehicle to get you to a destination, has probably never been to any destinations, because as easily as it would take me to get on a plane or go from here to get in a taxi to the airport and fly there directly to where you live, or I could go from here to a train to Madrid, and from Madrid to a motorcycle, and then from there across on the boat. I mean, there are just a number of different ways. It just depends on how quickly do you want to get to the destination, how comfortable do you feel with the vehicles, and then making sure that you understand what those vehicles are. And before we get out of here, so I completely I'm aligned with you there. I know that one of the things that you also do to help expose people to the different types of investments and help people to get their minds around that is with your EZFI University. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that and how you're helping people today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So EZFI University, we're kind of actually in a pause right now, but we are going to have courses that's coming up. So we did a beta program where we did a mentorship thing to help really gather some data in terms of what kind of program we want to shape and et cetera. So our website right now, the EZFIUniversity.com, has a lot of free resources, a pretty in-depth article for people to learn about specifically multifamily apartment investing, but not only restricted to that, because when I talk with my investor, it becomes apparent to me there's many other things around getting your financial in gear to optimize it to invest in different type of investments. So we also talked about a little bit about the 401k funds. How can you invest, in real estate through 401k funds? And how do you actually invest, looking at whole life insurance, because that could potentially be a really nice vehicle to play along with that, being your own bank, all that type of financial information. Because by dealing with hundreds and thousands of investors now, that we notice that these topics just keeps on coming up, and then often has anything to do with real estate. So we try to kind of help people having a whole more full picture versus, I'm just taking my money, investing into multifamily, because the economy, the different type of asset you mentioned that you invested in, all have its own cycles. And then so now the latest thing that we're looking at is also macroeconomics, because buying the right market is like really market cycle, is really something to kind of look for. And then the latest epiphany I had was after consuming all these macroeconomics was, everything is kind of investment. It potentially now your investment goal should not be about just growth. It is about how do you preserve your dollar value in an inflationary scenario, because literally you're not investing, you're just investing to see which one's going to play better against the inflation, right? So at different cycles, you have different thought process on. Anyway, so EZFI University has a lot of article blogs that we have created for that. We also just started a YouTube channel as well, deliberately making some videos to help people understand the macroeconomics, different types of investments in a much shorter video format. So that's what we do. And we do have courses that is coming up. The first one we're going to be releasing on the online courses is to do with how do you become a passive investor, having all your stuff set up within 4 to 6 week time, to be feeling really confident to investing, evaluating different types of multifamily apartment opportunities, and be successful as a passive investor. So anyway, that's what we do. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, and just once again, I mean, it's really is how do you take a number of different aspects together, or the context? How do you take the current context and put it into a way that makes the most sense for you? Thinking about things like the macroeconomic situation, thinking about the location in which you live. It's very different if you're living in Spain versus if you're living in the United States. And if your assets that you're investing in are in Spain versus the United States, what are the vehicles that you feel comfortable with? Is that real estate? Is that some type of a paper asset? Is that some type of an insurance policy that can provide you cash value? All these different things, once again, just to say and show that there are many different vehicles to help you get to your destination.
Right.
Appreciate you giving us more insight into what you're doing.
And the mindset too, because we talked about arbitrage. Like, I'm sure there's a reason why you live in Barcelona, because living at the 80% of the world, if you're from Seattle, you realize that 80% of the world is probably at a lower standard of living than you are. If you're from LA or New York, then probably 90% of the world is below the standard of living that you're at. So you can live, the saying is always that you can live like a queen with minimum wages in Thailand, for example. It's a life choice as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all those things are important. And this is what helps people, just to reinforce the message that everything is not about currency, right? It's not about, or a lot of people would say money. Everything is not about money. Even though you think it may be, there are things that are much more important. I'm not saying that you don't have to have it, because I come from a family where we didn't have it. And I know that is just, it's no fun. So it's not to say that that's not important, but there are things that are much more important than just money. But so appreciate you hitting on that. And you know what, Elisa, we have to get to the going long final three. It's like the conversation just like fly by. So, but the thing is, since you're our special guest, I will never ask anyone the going long final three unless you tell me, because you're our special guest, that you're ready. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I knew you'd be ready. So we started with you over in this wonderful state of Washington. I'd like to bring it back to this side of the pond. As you've mentioned, and as I mentioned, Barcelona, Spain, and Europe has been my kind of new home for the last 21 years. So I would love for you to share with the Going Long family, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Yeah, I would just say Berlin.
Mm.
Berlin is, I think it's one of these very underrated capital,
Yeah.
European capital. I mean, people always talk about other, I do love Madrid as well. And the reason why is soul of the city. There is a soul of the city, and then so much that city has going through. So when, I love history, when you go looking through the history of it and you feel the people, it just everything kind of come together for me in Berlin. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So that's a vote for Berlin. You'll be there in the show notes as well. Second question really, Elisa, has a lot to do with experience that I've had from being exposed to very successful people. And I consider you to be someone who's very successful. And one of the things that I've recognized, and one of the reasons that very successful people tend to be successful, is because they, unlike most people, whenever they try something new, they put a great plan together and then they execute the plan. Once they get everything right, because they get everything right usually the first time, and it allows them to go. Did I just say that? Sorry about that. Don't worry. It's just a joke. It was just a joke. It was a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. Everybody in the Going Long family knows that it's just a joke. It's an inside joke that I do with the Going Long family. Elisa's going, oh my gosh, man, what are you doing? No, it's just a joke. So of course nobody, like most of the time you don't get things right the first time, right? I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I used to think, hey, everybody, you get things right the first time. And the thing is, Elisa, really successful people, they probably make 20 to 50 times more mistakes than everybody else. It's just the reality.
Right.
But the reality also is, and this, I know the first time was a joke, but this is no joke. The thing is, those really successful people, every time they make a mistake that's relevant, without a doubt, every single time they stop, they learn from the mistake or the learning opportunity or the failure event, however you want to call it. And then they put different strategies, tactics, and actions in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening again. So I don't want you to think about the failure event or the mistake or whatever, but what is the one lesson that you learned that you know that the Going Long family needs to know today?
I think there's so many failure, as you mentioned before. But I would say, if I may allow two things, I don't know. One is actually to try fast and to fail fast, right? Because the faster, more iteration that you go after, you can learn more. And get started really is like really important lesson there.
Love it.
The second part is actually I will keep it to the truth of the show over here. I think that's really the biggest lesson is like get started. Yeah. Because you see a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, and I'll go to the conference and meet same set of people a couple years later, and they're still pondering about the same question. But they're like, oh, how did you like have 3,000 units in that short span of time? It's like, well, just do more, do more. Yeah.
Love that. So get started. Don't be afraid to fail fast, forward, and frequently. So, but more importantly, you've got to get started. So appreciate that. And then lastly is really, what's the one, and I know you love reading books and you've got a lot of books and that kind of thing, but what's the one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family today?
This is kind of late, for like, I always have the one new favorite, the latest. I would say Who Not How. For all your entrepreneurs out there, it's the Who Not How. And for all your investors out there, it's obviously the classic Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I think if you haven't read any investment book, that should be one that you should start thinking about. It's the mindset. It's a mindset. The Who Not How talks about, because as entrepreneurs, you are afraid to spend money for your payrolls and et cetera, the person to hire, but then you don't understand that's actually opportunities. The person who you hire may be the person who's going to help you 10x your business. Yep. Right? Just have to be the right person.
Yeah. So we will definitely include that, Mr. Sullivan, Dan Sullivan. So Who Not How. And wow, I'm just thinking about the conversation. And once again, I mean, you talked from the very beginning, going from those 40 hours, lucky you, to 80 hours because you decided you wanted to like own your own business.
Not 80 anymore. It's a little less.
It's a little less because you've been reading Dan Sullivan. You figured out Who Not How. Stop trying to do everything on your own. Right. But no, I mean, when you went through those moments when you were in your IT role and you saw your managers and your managers' managers, and you realized to yourself, hey, listen, I don't really want to live this life. As you mentioned to us before, you had some very real life personal events that happened to you that made you realize, hey, listen, I don't want to keep going through this. I want to live my life, the best life, bring life to the earth, and et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? And so then you decided it was time to take your own path. And as you took your path and you recognized the lessons that you learned that you wanted to continue moving forward, you talked about your dad as an example early on, and you realized that, hey, you wanted to have different experiences. You had stock experiences and you had real estate experiences, and you realized with the real estate that this was something that was actually providing you with true value, money in the bank account, true experience. And so you took those first steps. You got started in those B and C properties. You quickly decided, hey, listen, you wanted to go to something bigger, larger, gain more experience. You continued to do that. You recognized even in the multifamily, you wanted to go beyond your backyard, go larger, continue to scale. You recognized you would need to go other places to do that. And you followed a similar pattern. You got the education, and then you took action. And as a result, not only are you continuing to move forward yourself, you're also now bringing on other investors, helping them to get closer to their goals, to their dreams. You have an educational platform. And I think you're even going to be a guest speaker coming up sometime soon. So, I know that everybody's saying, just ask her the question, Billy. So listen, Elisa, help us understand, how can the Going Long family find out more about you, what you're doing, and maybe even some of the speaking events that you're going to be out soon?
Yeah, definitely. So we're part of the Limitless Expo in Scottsdale, June 9th to the 11th. And that's a conference hosted by Kenny Macquarie, Rich Dad's real estate advisor, basically. Robert's obviously going to be there as well. So you can find out more about us, anything that is going on at EZFIUniversity.com. And you can kind of see right here, up here. EZFIUniversity.com to find out all the contents, how to get in contact with us. Also check out us on the YouTube, give us a subscribe or like, because our marketing teams really try to grow that channel. We only have an impressive 450 people channel right now, but we fully confident that we're going to be building a very large base based on the stuff that we have laid out strategically over that channel. So lots going on, hey, it's very interesting market right now. So we're just trying to provide some more resources for people to kind of navigate the difficulties right now. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Elisa, thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Everyone, you have the opportunity to reach out to Elisa directly. She's giving you the website, EZFIUniversity.com. You can find out what's going on. If you happen to be in the Scottsdale area as well, you can find out and maybe see her at her speaking event. And so listen, Elisa, I wanted to thank you very much for deciding to invest your time with me and the entire Going Long family. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Billy. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. If you give me like 15 seconds, I just want to wrap things up with the Going Long family. We'll be out of here. So listen, everybody, Elisa gave you so much practical knowledge that you can actually share this conversation, share today's episode with family, with friends, have the conversation, talk about what it's like working in a high stress IT environment and thinking about the things that are most important to you. But the most important part is when you're sharing this and having the conversation. So while you're doing those things, sharing the episode today and having the conversations, I'm going to be preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Once again, today's conversation was sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you want to find out more, go to firstgencp.com/invest.